well as part of any presentation with this. If it's where the presenters, if you want to allow questions during, if you want to wait until the end, then I'll let you set up as to, in regards to what your preference is on that as you begin your presentation. So beginning in no particular order, I'll start first with CRG, whoever might be coming to present on behalf of CRG.
Present.
Okay, and if you'll, of course, obviously share your name and such once you begin to make your way, and we'll begin to move forward with the presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate it, sir. Just make sure Okay, I appreciate everybody's time. Can you hear me okay without the microphone?
So the ones can hear you again virtually, you need to share the microphone.
Understood, sir. I'm a Marine, so you gotta forgive me for microphones on the end. My name's Alex Carney. I'm actually a former Special Operations Officer in the Marine Corps. And the basics of what my partners and I did when we started this particular company, we took a mapping and communication technique that we use every day and every night overseas during counterterrorism operations, and we took that mapping technique and we adapted it to domestic infrastructure, starting with schools. At this point, we probably mapped 15,000 schools and a lot of other infrastructure. And what I want to orient everybody on, particularly when it comes to mapping, is your philosophy behind mapping. Because for us, this wasn't something that we made up out of nowhere. It wasn't just like a good idea. For us, it was born out of necessity. And it wasn't talking, how do you communicate or how do you talk in a big building like a high school. It was, how do you communicate about that mud hut right there? And that red circle is a place you've never been to before at night if you're in some remote river valley in Iraq or Afghanistan. So just like if there's a school safety event at a big high school, you're going to have a lot of different public safety agencies respond from the city, county, state level. They're all coming to one place. They have no idea where the art room is in the high school. They're working with agencies they don't work with every day. The same thing happens to us overseas. So it's never just Marines with Marines, or Navy SEALs with Navy SEALs, or Army Rangers with Army Rangers. Or we're always in these mixed up task forces of people. We're packed together on a helicopter, and you gotta land outside this village in the middle of the night and walk in and communicate about that place, even though no one's ever been there before. So to solve that problem, we came up with a really simple concept, and you can see it there in the background, called the gridded reference graphic, or the GRG. And what we would do was take overhead imagery of that objective area we were going to, and we just turned it into a simple game of Battleship. So we put letters across the top and numbers across the side, and we gridded out that entire objective area so you could communicate about any location on that site. We would number buildings, we would letter intersections. As it got more sophisticated, we might overlay our tactical plan on here graphically. But the secret of this was that everyone who was going to a mission in Iraq Village 192 got the same map. So it didn't matter if you're flying a jet off an aircraft carrier to come support an operation here, or if you're jumping off the back of a helicopter. If I told everybody in this room to look at maybe grid square G4, so go across the top to the letter G, down to the letter 4, and find intersection C or intersection Charlie, and north is up, so come to the left or come to the west along the road to intersection Bravo, and meeting at the northeast corner of compound 13. Everybody in this room could probably follow what I'm talking about. Some of you may or may not have been to Iraq Village 192. So it's supposed to be a concept that dumb Marines like me can actually use to communicate in new locations under stress. You can see two personal pictures on the bottom left and bottom right, so you can see context on how we use maps overseas, because sometimes it's difficult to kind of connect the dots here. On the left, you can actually see a screenshot from my helmet camera. You can see my night vision goggles coming down there in the upper left. If you watch that video, we went through a building in Iraq, and I need to communicate with the rest of my team who's outside the building. We've never been in this neighborhood before, so to understand what they're passing over the radio location-wise, I pull this 1 cent gritty piece of paper out of my pocket in the dark, reference what they're talking about, make a decision, shove it back in my pocket, and keep going. And I show that just to illustrate that on the operator level overseas, we use these maps every day and every night to communicate amongst ourselves, because we're always in a new place and we need to communicate and make decisions. On the right, however, that's our version overseas of what public safety back here would call a unified command post, maybe. What you can't see spread in the hood of that Humvee in front of me is a poster size GRG, the village we're operating in. And you have an Afghan army officer, an Afghan police officer, myself and an Afghan commando, we're all gathered around one map talking a common language about a village on the Iranian border that none of us have ever been to before. And the point of the picture is I speak really crappy Farsi or Dari, and they don't speak any English at all. We don't share any common training. Our radios definitely don't communicate with each other. Our military doctrine is simply, definitely not the same. But this simple gridded out view of this village is what's allowing us to collaborate and provide command and control during breaking the battle here. So I show those two pictures just to kind of give you the buckets on how we use maps overseas, because it's really informed how we implement them back here with public safety. And then we always show the picture on the right just because most people have seen the famous picture from the Osama bin Laden raid. What you see in front of Secretary Clinton is the GRG at bin Laden's compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. I have to be honest with the group, I'm a U.S. Marine, so I hate Navy SEALs, and I hate putting pictures of them in my presentations. But on the left there, that's Rob O'Neill, one of the SEALs who was on the operation that evening. And what's interesting is if you look at the picture his team took at the end of the night when they got off the ship after the operation, every single one of them has the same map that's in front of Secretary Clinton on quarterback sleeves on their arms. And we show this just to illustrate that this is like the pivotal night raid for our community in the last 20 years. And you think about how much money and technology and resources were allocated to just this one night. But at the end of the night, how are people communicating? Whether they're at the top of the chain of command in DC, or they're jumping off the back of a helicopter, they're all just talking about the simple gridded common operating picture for a site that none of them have ever been to before in Pakistan. So our challenge was obviously how do you make it work back here. Clearly not everything we do in remote river valleys overseas translates to domestic, public safety. So our goal was to take our lessons learned in mapping and in communication and apply it to the out-of-date school blueprint that could be buried in someone's emergency action plan and equip public safety back here with a really accurate, simple, accessible tool that they could use to reference location when they were responding to a tactical nightmare building like a high school. This is actually one of the first schools we ever mapped, probably back in 2016, single-story suburbia elementary school. Not the most complex school out there. However, everybody in this room who's navigated in your kids' school during back-to-school night, you can sympathize with the challenge a really stressed-out law enforcement officer might have trying to get to that STAR, which is the media center, during emergency if they've never been inside this building before. What we don't typically have overseas, what you can eventually get to back here, are abstract floor plans, and you see floor plans called out in a lot of after-action reports from big events. Most currently, Uvalde floor plans were inaccurate. Sandy Hook stands out to me because, Sandy Hook was a really small building. It was like half the size of this school, but if you read that after-action report, the Connecticut State Police call out their inability to access floor plans for the duration of that event as inhibiting their communication and command and control. We looked at floor plans, though, from our perspective of just people who'd spent a lot of time using maps to push people around the battlefield. And we saw two issues with something like this. The first issue is very difficult to hand an abstract drawing like this to a tactical decision maker who's not familiar with the site and expect they can look at this quickly and actually use it to communicate and make a plan in a few seconds. So a drawing like this is obviously abstract. It's not oriented in a common direction. It's not tied to any of the terrain around the building. The tactical people in here know that tactics is all about approach and how you move people and communication from the outside in and communication to people from the inside to the outside. So when you have an abstract drawing that's not tied to the key terrain or the approach routes around the building, you're cutting off half the space people need to communicate about, which is parking lots and roads, which are also making it a lot harder for someone like a SWAT team commander to look at this in a couple seconds and actually use it to orient themselves and use it to make a better decision. The second thing we found is that schools change year to year. It is tough to keep floor plans up to date in the hands of public safety. This is a great example because we actually got this floor plan from the local PD, and you can see the gym here on the upper right. That's actually the cafeteria where we walked the school, and the gym was in the space in the upper center. So schools, big buildings change year to year. It's tough to keep those updates, with public safety. Third, we found they lacked a lot of information public safety wanted to use to communicate, like what a door was called, or what a hallway was called, or how you get up on a roof, how you shut off a sprinkler. A lot of that stuff is not labeled. So all in all, we found that they were difficult products for different public safety entities to actually use to make decisions and collaborate and communicate. The other half of it, though, was how does public safety even get to this during an emergency? So In this case, even if this local police department had this map printed on their vehicle, which they did not in this case, none of their other mutual aid partners or the other agencies that are around them that would come support them during a big event, they didn't have access to this map. And in this case, that included a county 911 center and a county SWAT team. So it didn't serve as a common operating picture for all these different entities that are supporting each other during a big event. So to the first point, what we created was something really simple called a collaborative response graphic, or a CRG, because it became more than the grid reference graphics we were using overseas. And what we would do was take overhead imagery of that property, that campus that we verified. We'd orient everything so north was always up, so you could talk objectively using cardinal directions, maybe instead of using a discipline-specific building side. We'd overlay the grid on there because we found the grid is really helpful for vectoring people into a location quickly on a big map, particularly like something as big as a high school. We'd overlay the floor plans on top of the imagery, and then we walk each building to update the floor plans. So we're going to make structural changes. We obviously want to capture the accurate labeling of rooms and stairwells and things like trauma kits and cameras. We're also trying to capture how people who work in this building every day naturally communicate about position. So if everybody in a high school called a particular hallway the athletic wing, even if it wasn't on the sign on the wall in the building or labeled on the architectural drawing, we want to capture that kind of information on the school map because that's probably how they're going to refer to their position if they're making a 911 call from that location. But the point is, if I want to orientate my position in media center in this particular building, it could be as simple as saying, maybe park on the northeast side of the building in grid square H2, and then into door C, because that's the door I propped open, and meeting at the intersection of orange and the purple hallway. So in a few seconds under stress, I can communicate a link-up plan to someone who's never been inside this particular structure before. We started with schools, for obvious reasons. Through the process of mapping thousands of them, we realized we needed to make two different types of maps. So we'll make something we call a micro CRG, which you see in front of you right now. It's a zoomed in layer for each floor of the structure. So you have all the internal details of the building, you have the media imagery around the building, and a grid overlay on top. So we'll obviously make a separate layer like this for each floor of the structure. We also realized that half of the chaos and communication during a big event was happening outside of the building. So we started to make something we call a macro CRG, which is a zoomed out overview of the campus and the surrounding grounds. And what we're trying to capture is all the space that public safety might use outside of the building to communicate. So where their staging areas might get located, where their command posts might get located, where traffic control points might get set up, or evacuation routes. All that stuff can get coordinated on a map like this. So you really need to have both those kind of views during an incident. What's happening internal to the structure, what's happening around the building when it comes to managing that particular event. We quickly realized, though, the technique didn't apply to just schools, it really applied to any big buildings. So we started to map everything from airports and high rises to government buildings, and that's actually the headquarters of a major corporation, manufacturing stuff. That's actually the Super Bowl from last year, hospitals and theme parks and malls. And through the process of mapping all these buildings, we realized that the concept or the technique, it didn't apply to just schools. It was how are you creating a really accessible, understandable map that public safety can use to communicate in an unfamiliar location. The process that we go through when we make maps is we take the floor plans as they exist for a facility, whether they're good, bad, or ugly. We go out and walk the building, we update those floor plans. We send a proof back to the school. We share that proof with the immediate public safety community, usually on the police and fire side, so we can capture any pre-planning that they might have done visually on the maps. And everybody gets buy-in on the data that's actually visually displayed on the maps. Different people have different opinions on how big the grid should be or what color should we do the doors and things like that. So we try and get everybody's buy-in so these things are as usable as possible for all the different entities that support each school. At that point, we'll publish the final maps, and that's where the second challenge of this starts, because what I realized very quickly was anybody could make a pretty map of a school, but if public safety entities at the local and the county and the state level didn't have access to those maps, then it was completely useless. So we started probably putting more energy in our implementation of maps than actually the making of the maps themselves. The first thing that I realized was that no matter how sophisticated technology got, you still needed to be able to print maps out. And that might sound old-fashioned to some people in the room, but overseas we have like smartphones on our body armor and we have tablets at our command posts, but every operator has a piece of paper shoved in their pocket or on a quarterback sleeve on their arm. And the first thing that I do when I set up our version of the command post overseas is unroll a poster in my backpack and tack it up on my wall. So I think that, I probably watched 300 or 400 active shooter drills watching public safety use maps, and I think probably nothing cuts through the fog of confusion at a big command post like unrolling a CRG out that everybody can gather around and share a common look at the site. Piece of paper, don't run out of batteries. Obviously, though, there are a lot of schools in the state of Alabama. People aren't going to be carrying around posters of all those schools, so we have to use technology to make maps more accessible. The first place that we focus in is in 911 centers. So we're going to make sure that any of the pre-existing call handling software that a 911 center is using to geolocate a 911 call, we're going to integrate our maps into that system. So not only can the call taker see the map on software that they're already using every day, but they can actually see where the 911 call plots on top of the map. And the whole purpose of that is to make sure that the first person in the chain of communication in a big event like this has a quick sight picture of what that school actually looks like, so they can pass good location information to people who are going to actually action it. The second thing we're going to do is make sure that whatever software platforms, police, fire, EMS, the SWAT team are using in a given community, both at the local, the county, at the state level, that our maps can go into their system. So in the state of Alabama, there could be dozens of different software platforms people are using to access maps. We don't really care what you're using to access maps. We're going to create the maps in the file type and the file size you need to integrate in those systems. Because what I realized is if the map wasn't front and center on what software public safety was using every day, they would not actually access it during the stress of a real emergency. So it has to be something that is extremely accessible, something that people use every day for them to actually use it during a real event. The third thing we'll do is we'll integrate in the school safety software that's out there. Usually that's in the form of software like Navigate 360, like a panic button type application, especially camera management systems. We found that as schools started to share their camera feeds out with outside law enforcement agencies, it was very difficult for somebody to look at a camera feed from a building they weren't familiar with and actually use it to make a decision in real time. It turns out that cameras were great for reconstructing events, a lot harder to actually look at a feed, use that to pass information to people during an actual event. So we found that when we coupled our maps with people's camera feeds, it made it a lot easier to look at a camera feed, connect it to a location of the building that someone could actually make a decision about and pass on to someone who could do something about it. Lastly, we realized that public safety was also using a lot of different tools to track themselves. So that could be a body camera, that could be a cell phone application. We would create the maps in whatever file type that they needed to integrate into those systems. And the end state of that is if you're tracking people moving through a building, you can do it overlaid on top of a map of a school. So in this case, you can see 2 officers moving north to south down the C wing. You can see 2 moving west to east there along the A wing. You can see badge number 2208 overlaid on top of the principal's office. So in this case, this is a SWAT team at a lockdown at a school. They're able to track themselves on top of the map in this big building for better coordination and communication. So, to kind of wrap this up here, I think, what I've learned, on one hand, to make a map usable for a first responder actually needs to make a decision during the stress of an incident. It has to be made a certain way. And the way that we do it is really based off how we did things overseas, because we realized through thousands of repetitions that it worked. On the other hand, you had to make sure that how you were creating the maps were flexible enough to go into everybody's software systems. Because in a school safety event, you're obviously going to have dozens of agencies respond at the local, at the city, at the county, at the state, even at the federal level. They're all coming in one location. They use different software platforms to access data. Can a map get put into all those different systems so that regardless of who's showing up, they have access to the same map of the site, so everybody can speak a common language about the site. And that's what we do. So I appreciate everybody's time, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have. Thank you.
Any questions?
Good.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the time.
Next, we'll have Navigate 360. So whomever will be coming, please identify yourself and look forward to the presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Tanya Jones. Thank you so much for the opportunity to meet with you all today. And this is my colleague, Brad Spicer.
Hello. So I'm Brad Spicer. I kind of oversee our safety and emergency management for Navigate 360. Navigate 360, we have acquired several companies over the last several years, so some of the solutions we have you might be familiar with. We started off with Alice. I was the founder and CEO of Safe Plans. That was our second acquisition. And we have continued to grow over the last years to currently what is Navigate 360 to provide a holistic school safety solution. My background was Army, so I'll talk slow for our Marine friend there, but no, thank you for your service, appreciate it. And then I was a state trooper in Missouri. I was on our SWAT team and I got moved to our governor's detail. And we had a governor get elected with 2 kids in school. And at that time, I never thought about how a school should respond to an emergency. If you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I thought about what the police should do. I was able to look at it from how schools should prepare. And I had an epiphany that there's really 2 separate responses. There's the school response and there's the public safety response. The school response is going to save more lives. That is not to fault public safety. That's not just because of Uvalde. That's just the reality. They're there, they're on the scene. So I started working, building out some software solutions, built the first cloud-based emergency planning solution in 2003 that was statewide in Missouri. And we continued to grow, and then 2019 was the acquisition. At Navigate 360, we work across the country. We work with about roughly 1 in 3, 1 in 4 schools at some level. It is a holistic solution. Some embrace all of our solutions, some just a handful. In Alabama, Tanya put together some of our clients here that work with us on everything from our ALICE training, our behavioral threat assessment programs, so our PBIS, Positive Behavior Interventions and Support. So we work across Alabama with quite a few. What I wanted to talk about today was just some concepts, because school safety is complicated and there is no one magic solution. When we look at some recent surveys, some safety challenges that have been shared, certainly it's school shootings. It's in the news, it is front of mind. We realize that is not the only concern. Less than 50% of schools feel prepared. That peace of mind is not there. 40% of educators feel less safe than they did 5 years ago. 38% of students are not confident. We keep passing laws, we keep making changes. It doesn't seem like we're moving the needle in the right direction. So what I would really encourage the task force here to look at is kind of a different approach. And it would be what I would call an Alabama One plan, more of a capitated approach. If you think for a second, how much is spent in the state of Alabama on school safety at the local level and the state level? And I know we have a superintendent on the panel, and it's a lot of what we spend. And if we can look to kind of get a better use of those funds, not only is it going to be more efficient, which is swell, we all want to save money, it's going to be more effective. It's going to be data driven. We're going to be able to look to see what's working and what's not working. That Alabama One plan allows us to look at a holistic approach. I understand that education is local. I served on a school board for a number of years. I also understand emergencies are local. There's a cliche in emergency management that says that. And the feds pass it to the states, and the states pass it to the cities and counties. And it's not wrong, but I'll tell you what is not local is best practices and standards of care. The state should look at it and say, look, we're going to look and establish what is the standard of care in all these different areas. And character and culture, that matters. And it's integrated throughout your emergency preparedness and your school climate. Detection and prevention, preparedness and response. The state should look and say, look, this is the standard of care. And you should look at your local experts to drive those areas. When we look at prevention, you might be familiar with the concept of pathway to violence. This is the pathway to violence. And it starts off with a grievance that gives someone a violent ideation. They obsess on it, they begin planning, they prepare, they implement. And the concept of behavioral threat assessment is to try to intervene somewhere between ideation and implementation. And that's important, and we'll talk a little bit about behavioral threat assessment in a little bit, but what I would encourage you to consider is a pathway to wellness, right? If we can look at character and culture and start working with students at a younger age to help them understand that grievance is not grounds for a violent ideation and how to better deal with those conflicts, that's a pathway to wellness that limits our need for more behavioral threat assessments. So when we look at the different programs we have, for instance, we work with the state of Michigan statewide on a character and culture program. A common curriculum, a common framework that the state can push out to schools as resources, right? So it's certainly mental health and prevention, but resilience, our PBIS rewards. If you're not familiar with that concept, it's rewarding positive behavior in schools, right? It's not all stick, it's some carrot, right? It's, hey, we like that you're doing this. It allows us to roll it out and incentivize the behavior we want. Behavior intervention and restorative practices, character education, suicide awareness and prevention. You know, it changes, it seems like every 3 months, but it's certainly one of the top 3 leading causes of death of young people in our country. That's irrefutable, suicide. So we've got to be on top of that. And that pathway to wellness helps people understand that violence is not a solution, whether it's violence to self or violence to others. So that's a concept when we look at even early prevention, that character and culture. Now, when we look at violence prevention, certainly we want to look at behavioral threat assessment. And the state should look at that. Florida has a new state model that they're rolling out, and we're working with districts in Florida on that. We work with many of the national experts, Dr. Dewey Cornell, Dr. Marisa Randazzo, on their programs that they've developed. But when we look at behavioral threat assessment, it's okay if Alabama wants to look at that as part of an Alabama 1 plan and say, these are the things that work for us. What we hear from a lot of districts and a lot of people involved in the actual practice of behavioral threat assessment, it's overused. It's cumbersome, it's timely. We've kind of moved away from the concept of defining dangerousness. And if we look at what dangerousness is, I would break it down into the 4 R's. When someone stops seeing peaceful remedies, right, they might be dangerous. If they start caring about the ramifications of violence, whether that's suicide by cop, or just the punishment aspects of it, they could be dangerous. Then they're able to rationalize violence. So when there's not remedies, there's not careful ramifications, they're able to rationalize, they are ready for violence. That is a triage behavioral threat assessment that can be used so that these behavioral threat assessments are not overused, because it's very time consuming. We have the nation's largest TIP solution, where we look at, right now we're working with 12 states and hundreds of districts across the country and several federal agencies on our P3 TIP solution. I would encourage you to consider a statewide TIP program to funnel that in. Right, those TIP programs can do a lot. The other thing we're able to tie in with a TIP program is a Handle with Care program. For those not in law enforcement, Handle with Care, it looks at adverse childhood experiences. So maybe it's dad gets arrested on a Friday. Our Handle with Care program through our TIP program allows that officer to immediately notify the proper people in the school to say, hey, when Timmy shows up for school on Monday, realize something happened, and not doing his homework over the weekend wasn't his biggest problem. And here's some solutions you can do to help him. It takes 2 minutes for the police officer, then the school understands. Their relationship with the schools can get into cases and specifics on the arrest or what happened, but it lets the child know that that child had an adverse childhood experience. The TIP programs can also funnel directly into case management. A good number of our tips, I was just looking for last year, we had roughly 20,000 tips for harm to self. So suicide-related tips that came in. So that can automatically funnel to the school so they get alerted to say, hey, we just got a tip. Here's the solutions that can help and we can manage that. And then we can also look at harm to others. So that way there's a seamless practice. But a statewide tip program will maximize it. If you can get statewide programs, they're more effective and they're more efficient. That way marketing, resources, education, all can be through a common framework. It's not a disparate approach. I understand that many districts have been forward-leaning in that. I'm not suggesting that an Alabama 1 plan would punish those districts that have been forward-leaning. Those should be your leaders in this type of a program. Bring them in and say, you have developed best practices. You have developed standards of care. Help us lead. right? We're not looking to move anybody backwards in a one-plan approach. We're trying to elevate it to where there is a common framework. Our behavioral threat assessment, our experts, Dr. Dewey Cornell and Dr. Mauricio Randazzo, certainly two of the nation's leading behavioral threat assessment experts. We work with them on their systems and their training, and then Dr. Stark Poland, I think the leader, especially for youth suicide prevention. So we really try to stay on top of the forward edge, so that way we can build those resources that are out there. As we look at one plan, preparedness and response, again, when we look at preparedness, a common framework for your emergency plans, right? So that way they are standardized with terminology, that way we can train more effectively. But then we look at responding things in terms of how people are going to respond at the school, which is ALICE training or active shooter response training, how police respond to the school, which certainly ties into what CRG was talking about, and our emergency management solution. One of the other elements when we look at preparedness in a broad stroke is physical security. And a lot of funding goes to physical security, and it is not possible to physical security our way out of all the challenges schools face from a safety standpoint. That doesn't mean physical security doesn't have a role, it certainly does. I would encourage you to establish security standards for schools. To get a task force together and say, what are the standards that constitute a secure school from a physical security standpoint? So as new construction is built, as changes are made, as modifications are made, to say this is the standard for a school safety. We have that with fire code. You cannot add on a wing to a building or to any building in this state without taking into account the number of exits based on the occupancy of the room. It's standardized, and if it's built into the construction cost, the costs are not so exorbitant. So we look at legacy standards. This is what must exist. We could look at things like building entrances. Should classroom doors be able to lock? Should vision panels be coded? Things like this. Then as we do new construction, we can have that. It can be a moving target, but that way we have a standard. So that way if the state looks to fund a grant for physical security, it's not just hit or miss. We've got a standard. And that way parents can be assured that every school in the state meets the security standard for schools. I work with the region in Philadelphia, the 5 counties around Philadelphia. They call it Southeast Pennsylvania. We developed these, and that's how their Homeland Security funding grants were pushed out to schools. So that way we're able to develop a standard. As we look at the emergency planning standpoint, develop plans that are standardized, but they need to align with best practices and standards of care. So the task force would determine what that constitutes. A lot of that deals with things like we saw recently in the pandemic, but also with critical violent incidents. How are we going to respond to an active shooter incident? Common language, common framework. Too many people view lockdown as the only solution to a violent critical incident. We know with best practices, that's not the case. Roughly 70% of school shootings last year occurred outside the school. So people that were proximate to the shooter when that shooting happened, lockdown wouldn't help them. If you're outside the school when a shooting happens, a lockdown isn't going to help you. So we're not throwing lockdown away, we just have to embrace options. So our ALICE program really leads the way with options. You should certainly look at mobile apps and the value they bring for alerting and for access to information. We have a mobile app, we have a panic system. But a panic system alone is not the solution that you need without training. Think of how many cell phones are in school. And if the situation is so critical and so time competitive that I can't pull my phone out and call 911, there is zero chance police are going to be there fast enough to help me. Right? So we need to empower our educators and, as age appropriate, our students with training on how to respond. So if we look at mobile apps, we're just not totally relying blindly upon a mobile app. The ALICE training I mentioned, that stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. It was the first options-based active shooter response training. It is the nation's largest. We have about 14,000 trainers across the country that have embraced ALICE. And basically what it does is it provides people options. And we have a curriculum that is age-appropriate, so young kids don't get taught the same thing as high schoolers, and teachers get taught differently than the students. It's also trauma-informed. We're seeing more and more concerns from states and from educators and from mental health professionals that sometimes lockdown drills, when taught improperly, can do harm. We need to embrace a first do no harm concept. It needs to be trauma informed. The training should not create scars. You can think of how we learn, right? There could be single instance. I touch a hot stove, that creates a scar. We don't want to use the single instance learning in ALICE training. We want to build over time and use a trauma informed approach so people can share their concerns and express it. We have the curriculum and the e-learning to support that. I will point out, you mentioned as far as police response. We partner with CRG. Their maps can be available in our software through a secure portal. The other thing with public safety response, I mentioned there's the school response and the public safety response. We're constantly trying to innovate to improve school safety, and we work closely with NASRO, the National Association of School Resource Officers. We've recently we're working out a formalized agreement with them to put out a new training program called First Officer Engage, which goes away from a team-based approach to responding to an active shooter to help empower that first officer on the scene with the mental resources to go in to improve the probability of courage. How do we train people to respond more effectively under stress? Certainly mapping ties into that, so we want to make sure that's available. So we realized that there wasn't a lot of time to present today. We are thrilled to talk to the state of Alabama about any single solution, from a risk assessment tool to a new emergency planning to a panic button, character and culture, threat assessment. All those things are available, but we wanted you to consider take the time to look at a one-plan approach, develop specific work groups for each area, determine what the standard is in Alabama, and if you can take a capitated approach to where you start considering what is spent at the state and local level on school safety and pool that together, you will get a much more effective and more efficient school safety program. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Any questions? We'll be glad to push the microphone in any direction if anyone has questions. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Last presenter inside.
Time is short, so a couple of takeaways. Sure, everybody's got one first. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you today. My name is Dr. Steve McKinney. I'm the founder and CEO of Insight. You know, I love these kind of discussions, opportunity to talk about this. I think it's a great opportunity to exchange ideas and understand more about what's going on across the nation. I think one of the things in Alabama that everybody can probably that has heard me speak before or worked with me over the last 15 years is we, like a lot of situations, we don't always do the best at telling our success stories, right? We don't always do the best at sharing what we've done right. And that's kind of the nature of the world right now. Is the negative side of things is typically what captures the most attention. So what I'm going to tell you a little bit about is a success story and what we've done in the state of Alabama, really starting in 2005. And so that's what that history that I've handed out is going to be about. But I'll dive right in and talk about a few things here and how we have been involved in that process over the last 15 years or so. You'll see in your history there that one of the first things that Inside, and we were known by a little bit different name at the time, was involved with, came around after Hurricane Katrina. One of the programs that we were involved with was called Virtual Alabama. At that time, we were super small, and I mean super small, as in me and a laptop. So one of the very first contracts that we had was with the Department of Homeland Security, which of course later became ALEA, rolled all together, everything there with Jay and Fusion Center, everybody all together. So We were working with the CGIS, with Maureen Mitchell and a few of those, and also with Joe Davis and Jim Walker and the whole crew. And my chief responsibility was one of the senior engineers in devising the technology and working on that program. Well, that went on for a couple of years, and then shortly thereafter, there was the Virginia Tech shooting in 2007. That captured a lot of people's attention, and Joe Davis came to me and asked, what can we do? You know, we spent all this money building these systems, what can we do effectively to help school safety? So that began the journey for me personally in school safety. Right after that, there was a couple opportunities with some funding from the federal Homeland Security, and we started building what would be known as the Virtual Alabama School Safety System, or VAS-3. So I'm going to jump forward quite a bit here. During that time, we were contracted with initially CGIS, and then the Department of Homeland Security, and then ALEA. And then that was effectively handed off to the Department of Education. And that's a critical kind of shift in how a lot of these things happen and evolved. So you'll see there in 2011 was when that started to happen, of course. It was right before Sandy Hook. And then in 2014, I decided to start writing the code and building a separate independent platform, because I felt like I had the opportunity with a couple of other investments that went well, and I felt like we could do better with it if we had a focused, singular platform that would pull together. So launched that platform. Our first customer was University of Miami in Southern Florida in July 2015, and then of course every public school in the state of Alabama in October of 2015. So this has been kind of going for a while, and what I'll talk about here is some of that good news, some of the things that we have done well. Few of the statistics, again, because of limited time, don't want to go through too much on this, but just to give you some idea of the coverage and ubiquity of the Inside School Safety Platform in the state of Alabama. Via the Alabama Department of Education, State Department of Education's contract with us, 148 of the 149 school districts are actively using the platform. What our metric is on that is have they logged in and used something, on a minimum of a monthly basis. We have another system that we worked with the governor's office and the Department of Education, Nick Moore here, back in 2018 to help create via a BGA and COPS grants that were part of the STOP Act to create a system that was an aggregation system and redistribution system for notifications coming out. You'll see there, this was actually, newer statistics are available, just a few increases here, but this is for the 2023 school year. We announced a lot of this at our annual Alabama School Safety Summit conference in December. So there's been a few updates to this, but effectively 64,136 notifications went through the system. That basically is every public school's every message going out and being classified by our machine learning AI system into what is our standard response protocol as defined by state law: lockdown, secure perimeter, secure area, heightened awareness, and then of course informationals. So what you also notice there is over 211,000 drills have been logged. We've mapped over 288 million square feet. We've taken over 530 million pictures and had just in that time frame around 2,700 support conversations. So we are actively engaged with the community on a daily basis in education throughout the state. We do have a tip system that the state of Alabama, through the Department of Education, provides to all the schools. There were 959 tips that were logged last year. And then kind of in wrap up with this, just statistics-wise, we have a behavioral threat assessment system. The behavioral threat assessment system is based off of the Colorado protocols that were adopted in 2021, May of 2021, as the state's system or the state's protocol. So the Department of Education released that and asked us to work on building out a system for logging and managing that. So we built the BTM, or the case management system, for that to follow that protocol as specified. And you'll see at that time, and we actually, at our summit this year, we provided a professional learning unit. So that was a big deal for us to be able to do that. So there's quite a few more certified users now because we ran concurrent sessions the whole time down Gulf Shores for 2 days there. But at that point in December, we had 81 districts actively using the system, the Inside Assessment Behavioral Threat Assessment System, over 400 certified users, and around 305 cases submitted. Actually, those statistics were actually from before school started. We are now at over 525 cases submitted, and the certified user range is just over 1,000. So I wanted to draw our attention back to something I think that is of significance, just because it has been a large part of the game plan that was provided to us to work through in the state of Alabama. So you remember after Parkland, we had the governor convened a council for securing Alabama's facilities of education, the Civic Council in 2018. There were 10 recommendations that were put forth out of that. And just real quickly flying through those: funding for school resource officer and district coordinators, bond issue for enhancing building security, surveillance systems linked to law enforcement. And what I'll do is actually, I'm going to kind of make note of the ones that we have at Inside been actively part of and working on. So since 2018, we have connected 6,119 surveillance cameras to our system to make them available to local law enforcement. School-based mental health. The Inside Assess Behavioral Threat Assessment System, case management system, was built specifically in response to this directive. And as part of that, working with the Department of Education to identify and develop the Alabama protocol, which was, of course, derived from the Colorado protocol. Identifying warning signs, so that we talked about and we know. Reporting threats, the TIP system that we built that is available for all the schools in the state of Alabama is in response to this. Tracking school violence, the logging and tracking of all types of data that we currently provide in the Inside School Safety platform collectively help to address this, but there's also sides of that are being tracked within the CERT reporting with the Department of Education as well. Empowering accountability district safety coordinators, building a culture of school safety and school safety training and compliance teams. So one of the things that we independently do, of course, is for the last 14, well, it would have been 15 years this year, but of course we had COVID. So we've had the Alabama School Safety Summit. That's something that we've taken on and ran for the last decade or so. And so that's a big part of what we do as far as training, provide that to all of our school resource officers that can come. We do that down at the beach every year in December. It's kind of an off time. There's, so it does provide teachers, administrators, school resource officers. Even we see, EMA and some other entities that are involved in the public safety sector as part of that audience. So I'll talk specifically about the school safety platform that we have developed and implemented in the state of Alabama since 2015. So what you'll see here is the core of the platform. It is a place-based system. Our mapping of the school systems has always been top of mind, and like what I said in the history there that you can kind of see as a derivative of that is because where it was born. It was born out of Virtual Alabama. And Virtual Alabama, of course, was a mapping system. So in case you didn't have any familiarity with it, Virtual Alabama was the first behind the firewall statewide implementation of Google Earth Enterprise. So we were doing that way back when, getting a lot of that stuff going, and that was after Hurricane Katrina. So it drove and spurred a lot of this. So So now, at this point, we have all of the schools in the state of Alabama that have some mapping in our system. There are some gaps there. If I had one request, and I say that very carefully, there's a couple things. I guess I'd probably put training above this request, honestly, if I could only pick one thing. But if the committee wants to do something that is meaningful, I do agree with CRG there. I think updating mapping would be one of the principal things. The problem that we have run into in the state of Alabama historically is all of the funding that has been put out has always been, you can use it for this or you can use it for that. And if you do that, if school safety is on the list, if anything else is on the list, school safety is not going to get what is spent. There's too many situations that we have that, in Wilcox counties of the state and others like that are in such financial dire straits that if there is funding available, school safety is going to be way down in the priority list. Nobody really wants to talk about that or hear that, but that's just the facts. We see it over and over and over again. So, for instance, the funding that was made available, the $40 million last year, had a significant impact because it was targeted towards school safety. And if there are multiple options, like the A&T funds, where they're one of 6, it ain't going to happen. It's going to go to gym floors and roofs and facilities and structures and the million other things that schools are responsible for. So, quick look at the platform, how it's organized. The base platform is provided to every school in the state of Alabama as part of the state contract. What you'll see here is we drill in and focus on a few things. Maps, the plans, and the drills, of course, are principal and the top of mind. But we also have our online learning academy and learning management system, which is Inside Academy. As part of all of our work, we develop online curriculum for self-paced training, but we also provide on-site, of course. And that's why I say if I had that one particular ask, if there was anything that came out of this, the principal thing I think that we need more of is training. Just like a lot of probably this information is new to a lot of people, even though we've been doing it for over a decade. The issue is getting that awareness out there and making sure everybody is plugged in, right? Because like what we said, or like what CRG had even stated, it does no good if everyone doesn't have access to it. And if they don't know it exists, then they certainly can't have access to it. So what you'll see there across the top, that box, that represents the base platform. We do have additional modules that are capable of being added to the platform. Effectively kind of a la carte. This is what the state of Alabama provides. Currently, the base platform and the Inside Assess behavioral threat assessment. Quick look at our mapping system. This is just some demonstration data. One of the things that we do when we come in is we take the floor plans in any form that we can get them. We apply the National Fire Safety or National Safety, yes, NFAP there, sorry. Butcher that, sorry for the commissioner there. But the color coding system that is associated to use, yeah, there we go. The color coding systems associated to use, you'll notice that the light green represents classrooms, for instance, and the light blue represents large gathering areas like libraries, cafeterias, etc. All of this is in the system, and all of this is GIS based. We are a GIS, a formal GIS system, and we can pop that out into a myriad of other platforms for sharing and use. And I know that's been one of the things that was kind of a question of concern, and I really want to emphasize that is we have the ability to distribute the data immediately, and any administrator in the system at any school district can pop this out directly in Google Earth or into Azure products with a click of a button. There's no impediment there. What we try to do is we provide a pro forma MOU that states 3 parties that are involved. So, for instance, could be the 911 PSAP, could be the police department, could be the EMA, etc., in association with the school district and us. so that they have a formal structure for that data sharing, but technically it's a very simple thing to address. Just flipping through a few things here, you'll see how we organize all our information. Every classroom, when we go in, we do a few things. We take a 360-degree photo of every room. We do that all through the interior and exterior of the facility. We take pictures of the classroom from that entry point and of the doors. And we have other information, if available, from the student information systems or other that the school has. So in this instance, what you'll see there is a picture of the teacher, the class roster, seating charts, a few things like that can be added to any of this. And everything that goes in the system is intensely searchable. What we kind of pride a lot of what we do on is not having to necessarily know the names of things, but being able to find them quickly anyway in a Google style search. And so I'll move through these real quickly here. Documents area, the schools have provided a standard secure documents for being able to upload or share resources, things like reunification toolkits, other forms and templates that they can share throughout this. The MOUs between them and local first responder groups. And then, of course, our contacts, call list, etc. This has expanded a lot over the last couple of years because we have also added, and what I'll address a little bit here in a minute, just kind of fly through, is our Inside Edge system, which is a direct interface with access control. So we only support a few cloud-based systems at this point for video and for access control, which you can control those doors, of course, from that PSAP or 911 center. Remotely if you're given access to that, and also set the schedules and see who's accessing what and all the history that's coming through there. The standard plan that was developed, so back in 2007, and in that even in that history you'll see, in 1999 was the first requirement by law of the schools to develop a school safety plan. And this was after Columbine. And you'll see there's these events as you go through that history. Every time there's an event, then there's a cycle, right? We have a legislative event that comes after it that makes some kind of new rule and new standards, and then etc. And we'll kind of roll through that. And regretfully, it is just the nature of this business, I guess, is it tends to have a 6 to 12 month kind of cycle of engagement, and then things kind of start to drift back to normal and a lot of the attention is lost. And so you'll see that in that timeline of how that has kind of played out over the years and what that response has been. But in 2007, the original structure for the school safety plan standard in Alabama was released to all the schools. This was later modified after the release of the 2013 Guide to Development of High-Quality Emergency Operations Plans for Schools by FEMA, the Department of Education, U.S. Homeland Security. So that structure was modified to be representative of that national best practices, and is what you see here in our standard for campus emergency operations plans for schools in the state of Alabama. Real quickly, again, and I apologize, I know we're limited in time, and if anyone has questions during any of mine, please, I didn't say at the beginning, but don't hesitate to interrupt me. Inside Assess, again, is our behavioral threat assessment, behavioral threat assessment school case management system. And you'll see here it kind of breaks it up into what is a standard kind of phases effectively of research that we had done with the Department of Mental Health and some conversations that were associated there at the time, and moving through that process through screenings and evaluations over to assessments to plans, interventions, monitoring, and some of these, of course, can be very, very short term, and some can be extended where there's interventions and there's monitoring over extended periods of time. In addition to that, we have the site threat assessment portion of the application. Site threat assessment, this is based off of the DHS site assessments. And all the referencing, etc., and links to those is always presented to the users for further understanding as they go through that standard assessment year. Inside views, this is our virtual campus. This is how we come in, and when we do this, we come in, the very first thing we do is we take the school safety, the floor plans for the campus and ingest those into the platform and attribute them to the best that we can based off documentation, etc. that we have. And then the field verification portion happens where we go in and we take 360-degree photos all through the interior and all exterior of the facility. We identify over 100 different categories of emergency-related items that will be iconized and represented on the maps. Some of those are extracted from the 360-degree photos as we create that virtual campus, and some of those, of course, are going to be identified as physical points that we capture at the time, because we capture a lot of static photos of individual items as well. This is what you kind of see as a very quick little snapshot. You'll see the reference of the map in the top left-hand corner, and then, of course, that very familiar Google Street View kind of appearance. All of this is secured and encrypted data behind the firewall, but it has that same kind of feel and navigation experience. Inside Live is our surveillance connection. Effectively, we do not support every camera, but we're expanding that capability now. More cameras and more brands becoming available. Right now, we focus on cloud-based systems that we have gone through and meet our standards for security, etc. So it's a relatively limited collection of cameras that we do. But like we say, since 2018, we have provided 6,119 different connections through cameras to local law enforcement, or at least to the administration there. It is always up to the school what they share. That's always been the issue with some of it. It defies logic to a lot of us that there would ever be a question as to why they would not want to share that with local law enforcement. We don't, from Insight's perspective, we try to do everything we can to provide a fluid access and experience that, like I say, both from the MOU perspective, making sure that they have the documents to be able to execute those local agreements, but also just to be able to provide training, access, etc. So it is up to the school and those that, or rather the district, and there are some that are sensitive to those things, but we really try to encourage it. And that's, again, why I say if I could come back and ask for one thing from this committee, it'd be more support for training and awareness, because bringing those people together is what actually facilitates that. If we can get more of our first responder community at the table with our schools, then that trust will be built and it'll open up those relationships. Just a quick look at what our system kind of looks like. Again, everything is map-based, but we provide those live connections directly to the cameras. So it is a simple capability to just identify what you're looking for. One of the examples I always give is I met a guy from Pensacola a couple of years ago. He had 3,500 cameras in an Excel spreadsheet, and that was his access to the cameras. So over 28, 29 schools, that was how he managed it. And so obviously that's a nightmare. You can't really do anything with that. So what we do is we add a searchable index to all of our cameras so that the location can be identified. So for instance, if there's a flagpole in the parking lot and that's visible in one of the scenes, that's one of the indexed searchable kind of characteristics. When you search for what cameras are close to room 109, it's going to give you a list of the closest ones to it. We want it to be a usable system in the context of I may not have familiarity, but I can identify based off of what I do know real quickly which cameras I need to be accessing. And this is a quick view of one of the Rhombus cameras that has it live in the system. That's our lobby. Inside lockdown is our panic button or panic alert mobile app. This is not part of the state contract. We do have a lot of the school districts in the state that are using this, but it is not provided from the state down. So that is an a la carte option that is added. What it kind of looks like real quickly is just flipping through a few screens here on my phone. You'll see that we have 4 principal buttons there: the lockdown, police, medical, and fire. Also a send my status. When a user holds down the button, they have to hold it down for a period of time to be able to send a formal lockdown or a formal alert. If they release it prior to that slider bar filling it up, which is a 5-second count or a 3-second or 5-second count, one of those, it will send a test. And so that way you can see that the system is armed and ready, but you have every user has the ability to do that. One of the new features that we have is to send our status. So a administrator at a school can request status from all the personnel and get real quickly back a status of, okay, you need help, need medical or in danger, and have an instant count of that. When they click on one of those, it'll drill down and you can see exactly what teacher and where. All of this, of course, is spatially enabled too, so that we can see the locations. And then, of course, there's just an administrative message or custom messaging that they can send out very quickly to all their users. And if any administrator at the school that has permissions for this can do this functionality. They can also send it out, of course, from the web-based platform as well, and you see all the transactions there that have been fired off in that particular one. Inside Notify is our mass notification system. It is also what is behind the aggregation of all the messages and notifications that come through all of the different systems in the state of Alabama. When we started working on this back in 2018, we did a survey of all the schools, and we basically found there was about almost perfectly a third of school messenger, school cast, and in Blackboard Connect were the messaging systems that were actively being used. So what we did is we built a way to basically collect and aggregate and classify all the information that's coming through there. So it's a central dashboard that is classified into our standard response protocol as codified in state law. This is a quick look at what that looks like. You'll see if it is a voice message that the audio file can be played, but it is all transcribed and you can receive it in multiple modes. Inside tips, very basic. It is like what it sounds like. It is an anonymous or confidential tip system that is available at all schools in the state of Alabama, and works on any platform, very flexible, steps through, answers a few questions. We are also working on this to provide a voice option for a standard phone number for every school. Every school in the state of Alabama currently through Inside Notify and the aggregation system has a dedicated phone number for these purposes. So we're working on that portion of it to make the voice option for tips also enabled. Inside Edge is our access control system. So access control, we work again with a few different select cloud-enabled vendors where we can set schedules, ID management, etc. within the system, but also have the ability to override that. So to give you that instance of, there's a exterior door locked on campus at one of the schools when an event happens. This would allow a 911 operator to be able to pull that up immediately and unlock that door for officers as they approach. Inside Boost, this is one of the things that we have kind of found is as far as infrastructure is really important in a lot of schools, especially new schools. What you'll see is so many of these new schools are being built in such a way that at least a portion of them is up to the standard of a emergency shelter. So, a lot of times you've got 18 inches of concrete and rebar on some section of the school, But just in general, the way the schools are being built, they're basically a Faraday cage. So no cell signals penetrate well. So what this system does is it allows a relay of that cell system or that cellular signal throughout the school. And what we basically have is 3 carriers that we can support: Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile. We also have a separate system for FirstNet, so that if it is a facility that needs FirstNet boost access, that can also be added. Inside Fleet is our school bus management system for routing and live tracking. We believe that this is effectively part of access control. Whoever is getting on that bus is going to be getting on your campus. So it starts at the door. That transfers responsibility where that child leaves their door and steps on the bus and becomes your responsibility as a school district. So what we did is built this into the system. And as part of this, we have our bus SOS, which basically allows the school bus driver to be able to send an SOS and track where the location of that is. A lot of this was in response to the events that happened in Dale County several years ago, where that individual had set up that bunker and very strategically and tactically planned that attack. And so what we know is in that particular situation, the school bus was going down this dirt road to turn around every day and had been for a long time, but it was not on the route. But he knew about it and planned accordingly about that. So if that 15-year-old individual that had just started at school district that year had not been able to place that 911 call, we wouldn't have known where the bus was. And so that was a big deal. So part of what this is about is being able to not only define the routes, but also track the school bus on or off their routes and send alerts and notifications if they depart from a route for an extended period of time. And then lastly is training. And so training is definitely the piece that pulls all this together. We have done a really good job in the state of Alabama on building and responding to the demands that are put forth. We have a lot of talented people in the state who have given of themselves and their time and their energy to help push the state forward in keeping our teachers and our students safe. At the end of the day, school safety should be about building a better learning environment. What we want is each of the classrooms to be a place that the children feel safe and the teachers feel safe. Because if they don't feel safe, they can't do their job. So we've done a lot of good work over the last decade, but what we need to do now is make sure that everyone is very well versed on what is available to them and how to use it and how to collaborate better with it. So that would be my significant ask. I think the 2 things that do need to happen is we do need a mapping refresh and update for the entire state of Alabama, and we desperately need a site-based, continuous, yearly, ongoing training program. So that kind of gives you a little bit of this that I've put together. A quick shot of our Inside Academy, which is our learning management system where we build out courses that are available self-paced. And that is all I have. So if there are any questions, I'll be glad to try to address them as best I can.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Thank you so much. As we have heard from these presenters today, we would ask that any of the commission members to share any feedback and thoughts with Chairwoman Collins and or Adam to chime up to one of the 2 of you on that. I would ask Chairwoman Collins, I know that I'll mention just a few things that you jumped in on this, but any closing thoughts?
Now, I want to thank each of the presenters. I think it's been very informative. I love that the group that we have put together, or the speaker has put together, are all the different combination of users of these platforms and then opportunities. So I know that we will get back with you contact information from each of those that have given presentations, and that way anybody on the committee can reach out and get their questions answered. I would like us to kind of respond together our thought process through email, and then I will try to summarize kind of what we've heard and what the best recommendations are, and hopefully that we'll have a starting point to a report that we can discuss and give final recommendations to whenever we meet next, which will hopefully be sometime in February.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Collins. I would say that just a few things here that, as Chairwoman Collins has spoken with Speaker Ledbetter, one of his primary objectives or goal is trying to find any gaps in security and such as we continue moving forward with this. One of the things that was shared today that really, I guess it's sort of been something that I think it's almost been assumed has been a part of the work of this commission, and that is that there'll be a desire to try to build a culture of school safety. Was that been mentioned already here today? But that is something that will be very important. It's not something where there's a silver bullet or one thing then that sort of then makes it so that the school now is safe for all the faculty, the students, but it is something, an ongoing type of process. So to me, it's not just recently I've been taking some of the shots that are recommended either annually or semi-annually and such. And one of the shots I've taken was somewhat said, well, sort of one and done. Once you've done this, then you don't have to do it again for your lifetime. Like, whoa, that's really good. But to me, that's one of the things that does not fit into this is we try to build towards a culture of school safety, and that is that it's somewhat one and done. We've checked it off, we've done this, and now we just move forward. It's an ongoing thing, so it's like we have to have that booster all along the way. We've got to stay up to stuff, stay up to par on this. It's an ongoing type of thing. That's one of the things that I've been proud that I think has been a part of the work of the state of Alabama. And then I know, Dick, we've got you as well online, but through the governor's office. This is something the Governor Ivey has been very also concerned with, emphasizing that this being an ongoing type of need for us to be engaged with. So are there any other comments before we close and adjourn for today from any of the members of the commission? With that, then, there is an expectation that we will have another meeting, so Adam will be pushing out an email then in regards to this or in regards to our continued work as we continue to share thoughts that we might want to include as part of this report, along with any recommendations that we feel need to be included as part of this report going forward. So if there are no further comments, then we are adjourned.